trying to figure out the best lighting situation to film in this room, and this is 100% not it, but I have a lot of books to get through, so we're just going to power through it and we'll ignore the like excess of sun that is shining on this side of my face. Hi everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be a reading wrap up of the last 3 months, because the last time I updated you on how my reading was going was in May. Well, the end of May, the beginning of June. So I have got June, July and August to catch you up on. So we're not gonna hang around too long. We know what our reading wrap up is. I'm going to tell you about the books that I read. I'm going to give you some very brief thoughts. I do mean very brief because, like I said, I have a lot to catch you up on. What I should actually do is start off by telling you stats. So what I'm going to do actually is break it down by each month. So we'll start off with June. Obviously that is the first month I have to talk about. And in June I read 8 books, which is like not the lowest number you're going to see on here. It's not the highest number you're going to see on here either. It is kind of how my reading has been averaging this year, but it is lower than what I was reading like this time last year. I read a total of 3,248 pages, which was an average of 108.27 pages per day, which is great because I've been wanting to get it back to that over 100 pages per day average. And I will tell you where I'm at for the year for that when I get to the end of August. But just to give you the snapshot of June, that's how much I was reading then. The books I was reading were, well, it was 406 pages was my average pages per book. Definitely felt like I was getting back into my reading after having a month in April where I read like nothing, and then May sort of starting to get back into it. June felt very much back on track. During that month, I read 1 ebook, 3 audiobooks, 1 that was a mixture of usually audiobook and physical, and then 3 completely physical books, which has been unusual for me recently, so quite impressed with that. I think it was just that I didn't have the means to read some of them like alternatively. And then in terms of the age range that I was reading, it was 3 young adult and 5 adult. And then for star ratings, it was 5 4 stars and 3 5 stars. So it's a very good month in terms of enjoying what I was reading as well, which is always what we like to see, obviously. So that is my stats. Like I said, I'm not going to go too much in depth with them. You will see sort of the difference between each month as I do talk through those, because July very different to June. But what we're going to do now is talk about what I actually read and what my thoughts were on them. So the first book that I read in the month of June was Aurora Burning. I read this one for the Christopher Long live show that was on somebody's channel. I think this one was on Lisa's, but this was the second book in the Aurora cycle. I gave it 4 stars. It's been a 4-star both of the times that I've read it. I've read the first book in the series 3 times, and I've read the second and the third one 2 times, and I had full thoughts in that live show, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But basically I enjoy these. They're just like sort of not a perfect book for me. There is a couple of characters that irritate me. There is a couple of things with like the pacing. The endings always leave me coming back for more, but in the middle I always get a little bit bored with them. So a very good read, but not quite a 5-star. Like I said, if you do want to see our thoughts on this book, we did have a full live show on it. There's gonna be more Christopher Long books that show up in this wrap up, including the final one in this series, so I'll have some probably similar thoughts in a minute, but we'll get to that. The next book that I read in the month of June is the first of the books by this author you're going to see, but you are going to see multiple, and that one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is actually Meg's copy because I don't have mine in the house at the minute, but actually I did read part of this one and I will explain why in a minute. So this is Emily Henry's first adult romance book, I believe. She's written other books, YA stuff that I know of, but this is the first of her sort of adult romances, which is what she's mainly known for at the minute. And this one is about 2 authors who write in 2 very different genres, and basically they end up in sort of neighbouring houses over a summer, and they strike up a deal where they're both going to try and write in each other's like respective genre. And it's also about a lot more than that. There is like actually quite a lot more to this book than I expected it to be. There is a lot going off in January's life actually in this that like is causing her a lot of stress, and that's kind of what leads to this whole setup. But the romance between her and Gus, or Augustus, I very, very much enjoyed. I gave this one 5 stars, and I am glad that I'm finally reading Emily Henry books, because I've had this one, I've had a few of them for a while, but I wanted to read them even though they're not connected. I wanted to read them in publication order just to kind of see how her writing progressed, and I'm glad that I read this one, and it did make me want to pick up more, as you will see soon. So yeah, 5 stars. Very, very glad that I read this one in the month of June. The next one I have, we carried on with a bit of a romance kick for a while, so the next one that I have is Love to Love You by Ali Hazelwood. Now I gave this one 4 stars, but it was probably more like a 3.5. I enjoyed it, but I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of short stories anyway, especially with romance. I feel like I'm always just wanting like a touch more from them, because you can't get too much build up to a romance when it's just a short story, because there just isn't room for it. And I do like a little bit of a sort of will they won't they moment sort of building up to them getting together. You will see that in another book that I talk about later on, where I have that issue, and that is in a full-length novel. And I think because they were so short, I just didn't feel like I got too connected to the characters that much. I liked some of them more than others. I think this is the issue. Like, I read them all and I can't remember which one was my favourite. Clearly they weren't that memorable. I can't really tell you which couple was which. I think I liked the first one quite a lot, which was the one where they were sort of roommates, I believe. Yeah, that's Under One Roof. Stuck With You was the middle one. That was probably my least favourite. And then Below Zero I did enjoy. I liked the first and the third one. The second one I was a bit meh about. But Ali Hazelwood's writing, very easy to read, very enjoyable. I will be reading Love Theoretically at some point soon. I need to make sure that I keep forgetting to put it on my TBR, but I will be reading that one soon. So glad that I read it, but just probably my least favourite Ali Hazelwood thing that I have read. But then we're going to go on to a romance that I very, very much enjoyed. The sun is very, very bright right now, but I next read an arc of The 7 Year Slip. I'm going to insert a picture here. This is by Ashley Poston. I loved this book so much. So I read The Dead Romantics last year, and I don't know if I have raved about that book enough, but I loved it. I really, it was one of my favourite reads last year, and I had very high hopes for The 7 Year Slip, and I was not disappointed. So with Ashley Poston's adult romances that she's been writing recently, again, someone who's known for YA, she wrote the Once Upon a Con series. With her adult romances she's been writing, but both of them so far, when I've read the synopsis, have been like, that reminds me of a film. And this one reminded me a little bit of The Lake House, and I just really loved how this came together. I'm not going to go into the full synopsis, but essentially it is about a character who lives in an apartment that sometimes when she goes into it, it travels back in time. And there is this person there from 7 years ago, and she starts this romance with him. But like, she doesn't know when he's going to be there, and then also like inevitably she's going to run into him in the modern timeline at some point. You know it's going to have to happen. And I just really, really love this book so much. And I don't physically own it yet, which seems wrong because it is out, and I could have bought a copy, but I have bought a copy. I bought the Fairy Loot special edition, which we're waiting to arrive, and I'm very, very happy that I got that one, and it'll look very pretty on my shelf next to The Dead Romantics. And in case you can't tell, I gave this one 5 stars, so I do actually want to reread it already. The audiobook is on Script. Maybe I will do that at some point soon, who knows. The next book that I read was not a romance book at all. We are definitely moving away from that now. I've realised I need to check I'm still in June. I am, we're okay. The next book that I read was actually another 5 stars though, and that was In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. So this one is a Pinocchio retelling with robots, which is, I think, the best way to describe it, and it's very much on the same sort of vein as House on the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door in terms of the writing style. TJ Klune's writing can vary quite a lot on what he is writing at the time, because I have read various things from TJ Klune, one of which I very much did not like, another one I enjoyed, but it was like a YA superhero series and like was never gonna be like a favourite, and then there are these books which are the ones that I class as favourites, and I really, really enjoyed this one. I was not expecting actually to like it as much as I did, because I'd heard some mixed things about it, but no, this one, I listened to the audiobook and I had a great time with that. I listened to the audiobook for all of TJ Klune's books that I've read, I think, and yeah, cannot, like, so because I read it quite a while ago, my like words of why, my thoughts of like why I loved it in specifics have kind of gone from my head. That is how I am with books. Like, I can tell you like the emotions that something gave me, but then the specifics of like what I loved about it, especially on a first read, tend to disappear. But I do remember really loving the characters in this. There is like sort of a band of a couple of different robots, and I remember there was one that was like a Rumba type thing called Rambo, and I remember just loving sort of like the banter between like the friendship group, because you have the main character whose name I cannot remember. I should probably, Vic. You have the main character called Vic, and then you have sort of the friends that they have at the beginning, but then there is an unfamiliar android called Hap that appears as well, and just like the relationships that formed between Hap and the rest of the more established group. I had a great time. I kind of want to reread this already. Anyway, on to the next book. So the next one that I read was Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. So this one is not Guinevere and Arthur retelling as you would think it is, but it is about people who are kind of like vaguely related to them. And basically the two main characters are betrothed and don't particularly want to get married to each other because both of them are very much not interested in each other or in the gender that they are being betrothed to, basically. And when they realize that, when basically one of them is caught with a stable boy and the other one very much has eyes for the only female knight in the kingdom, they decide that they'd be quite good as allies rather than as enemies, because they very much disliked each other when they were just betrothed, but then when they, like I said, figure out that they can actually help each other, they form a little bit of an alliance. But then there is other things happening as well. What I will say is I like sort of the relationships aspect of this. I found the rest of the storyline a little bit less interesting, and it did at times, I kind of just wanted that to not be happening so much and just to focus on the relationships, because that was what I was there for. So I gave it 4 stars. It, like, pacing wise, it had a few issues, but in general I did very much enjoy this one. And okay, so we have 2 more books left in June, and the next one is the last one in a series I've already talked about. So it is Aurora's End. Similar thoughts to what I've already said in terms of like the pacing and things. This one I will say is my favorite one in the series. I can't really say too much why, because it spoils a big thing for this. I kept sort of hinting to people on Christophe Long that like there is something in this that is one of my favorite things in books, and when you know that that's one of my favorite things in books, you can probably guess where this is going, especially like if you have read the series, and you can kind of get that vibe from the end of book 2. I was like, I can see where this is going, and I'm happy about it. So yeah, I did enjoy it, how that was used. There was some storylines that, again, it's just there's certain characters in this I don't like as much as the others. So whenever it got to their perspective, I just got a little bit bored. But I think this is a really good way to tie up this series, and I gave it 4 stars. And then the last book that I read in the month of June was another romance. I was definitely on a bit of a romance kick. I still am, to be honest. And that was The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. So I read the first book in this series, The XX, last year, the year before, I can't remember, whenever it first came out, and I picked this one up recently at the works, and I think I actually put it on my TBR match. I think it ended up on there somehow. So I read it this month, although I probably should have saved it for like autumn. Witches always feels like more autumnal, but I had a good time with this one. I think I actually preferred it to the first one. I gave it 4 stars. Again, so it's set in a town where there is like a coven of witches. The town is also connected to this family that lives in Wales because they have this sort of like historical link to the town, and something happened in the first one where it basically got took over by the witches instead, and that involved sort of one brother from the Welsh family. This is the other brother from that family who's kind of been sent to do multiple things, but one of which is to kind of like re-establish the family's connection with the town, and the other one is that he just kind of wants to make a new life for himself away from his father, and he does that by setting up a shop, and it's sort of in opposition with the main character of this book, who also has a magic shop, and is a bit of a rivals to lovers sort of storyline. There is obviously more to it as well, because like things are still going wrong in this town. There's clearly some issues with the magic, and except I think I enjoyed the romance in this one more than the first one. I do like sort of rivals to lovers. I'm not an enemies to lovers girl. Like, I don't read a lot of fantasy, and you don't tend to get like true enemies to lovers in sort of contemporary romances. I know this isn't contemporary, but you know what I mean, it's light fantasy. You tend to get more rivals to lovers, and I like that because I like that sort of banter, but you can clearly tell they actually like each other, but they have to dislike each other because there is a rivalry. Anyway, I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. So that was June. That was a quick, I say quick, I've been filming for 15 minutes and I still have so many books to talk about, but July is shorter. So that was a quick little tour through June. We'll just move on to July's stats. So like I said, it will be shorter because I only read 6 books in the month of July, which I know, like, I only read 8 in June, but 6 is second to the month where I only read 2 books all month. 6 is the lowest I've read this year. So, and it definitely did feel like more of a slog going through some of the July reads. So quick stats, 2,348 pages, which was 75.74 per day. You can see that drop there. An average of 391 pages per book. 1 audiobook, 3 were a mixture, and then 2 physical reads. And then for age ranges, we had 1 young adult and 5 adult. And then for star ratings, we had 3 4 stars and 3 5 stars. So still like a decent reading month, but just not my best. We will get to a better reading month after this one. So let's just power through July. This is another one where you're going to see the first of a few books by the same author, and this one is Julia Quinn. So this is a Bridgerton series. This one is The Viscount Who Loved Me, which is the second book in the series. This one follows Anthony and Kate. So if you watch the Bridgerton series, it is season 2. It is quite different from the TV show. I really want to rewatch the TV show, but I own the Illumicrate set and I haven't read, well actually I've read like half of them now. I'm doing quite well. That's a spoiler for what you're going to see for the rest of this video. But I bought them without having read any of them, and I told myself that because I do own this pretty set and because I need to know whether or not I'm keeping this pretty set, which I'm pretty sure I am, I needed to reread I needed to read the ones that have already had a TV show based on them or are about to have a TV series based on them before I can do my rewatch. So I went into this one, I listened to the audiobook. It was a really quick audiobook. I listened to it while I was working one day. I had a fun time. Like I said, it is fairly different from the TV show, but it still has sort of the essence of it. There is a little bit less drama in terms of like Kate's sister being involved with it. For anyone who doesn't know, I feel like most people do know what Bridgerton is, but it is like a Regency era romance series that's about a family that has like, there's 8 siblings in the family, and each book is a different sibling being married off. And the second one is about Anthony, who is the oldest in the family. He is the Viscount. He got that title when his father died quite unexpectedly, and kind of been struggling with that a little bit, and has sort of been thinking about looking after the family rather than thinking about his own life and his own happiness. And then in this book he decides that he's going to get married, and he says that very sort of matter of fact, like that's something that he needs to do, so it doesn't matter about like being in love with a person. But obviously ends up meeting Kate in this, and love does come into it. And I really like Anthony and Kate as a duo. I like the banter that they have. I do think I preferred the TV show, but I had a good time with this and I gave it 4 stars. We're on a romance kick again, and it is a second book by an author, and this one is People We Meet on Vacation, or You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is also not my copy. I didn't explain with Beach Read why I read part of Meg's copy. Anyone who has the UK edition of Beach Read, there is a different ending in the US edition. It's just the last chapter. It's like, it's a small amount of stuff that's different, but it's fairly substantial what is different. And I did not realise this because I sort of finished reading it and said to Meg, like, oh, like that ending just felt a little bit like, the epilogue felt a little bit meh. And she was like, well, did this happen? And I was like, no. Like, so immediately went and grabbed her US copy. I do recommend, if you have read the UK copy, to try and find the US copy, or like I think you can find the epilogue online of Beach Read to see what the difference is. I don't think this one has a difference. I didn't actually check, but I'd only heard about the difference for Beach Read. This one I very much enjoyed. I found myself enjoying each Emily Henry book I read more than the last one. This one is about Alex and Poppy. They meet in university, and after sort of a slightly rocky start, they end up as friends, and they go on vacations together every year. And then something happened a couple of summers ago that has meant that they have not gone on vacation again in the last couple of years. And in this one, Poppy sort of reaches out and asks him to come on holiday with her again, and inevitably and obviously you find out what happened a couple of years ago. Obviously there is a romance involved, things go from there. I had a very good time with this one. I really liked both of the leads in this. It's very similar thoughts to Beach Read. I just really like how Emily Henry writes romances. I feel like all of her romances are the right sort of balance of them being sort of fluffy romances, but then also having other things going on. I get bored if it's just a fluffy romance. Like, I tend to like there being something a little bit heavier in there, and I feel like hers all kind of strike that nice balance, and I had a good time reading it, and I don't really know what else to say, but there we go. 5 stars. Next up is one that you really don't need to hear me talk about too much because I've talked about it quite a lot, but I needed to do my reread before the film came out. It's my 7th time reading this book. Of course I gave it 5 stars. It is Red, White and Royal Blue. I love Alex, I love Henry, I love their relationship. I quite like all the sort of political drama that's going on in here as well, which is why I will say that the book is still better than the film. I really enjoyed the film, but I do still enjoy this a fair amount more because like there is so much. If you've watched the film and haven't read the book, please read it. There's just like so much more in this, like the emails, just everything. I loved it so much. 5 stars, no notes, fantastic. We're going to move away from romance now, and I think this is where I struggled a little bit this month. So the first book that I read that wasn't a romance was Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong. Actually, this one I listened to the audiobook and I got through it fairly quickly. I do like the audiobooks for, I was going to say this series, but this is technically the start of a new series, and I can't tell you too much of a synopsis of this because it spoils like sort of who's alive and who's not at the end of These Violent Delights duology. But basically, similar thoughts to what I had when I read that duology. I just have a fun time with these. They're not the best thing ever written, but the drama is impeccable and I love it. And I didn't think I would like the main character in this one because I didn't love them in that original duology, but I did find myself liking them a lot more in this one. I'm really intrigued to see where it goes because things were revealed at the end and I was like, oh, I saw it coming. It was like a reveal that was like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. But it did leave me wanting to come back to the second book. And there was also like a sort of fake marriage situation in here, and I'm just really intrigued to see where it goes. And then yeah, I did have quite a good time with this one. It's actually the next book is the one that I struggled with in July, and it's probably the one that like brought down my reading month, which is not to say it's a bad book because I gave it 4 stars, but I just took so long to get into it. And that is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marske. This is shining at me. So this one, I actually tried to start reading it last September and did a similar thing. Then I read a little bit of it and just couldn't get into it. And I feel like I can't give you a synopsis of it because it's a weird one where like it's hard to kind of, you just kind of go along with the ride. Like I could tell you what was happening, but not why things were happening throughout the entire book. But I did really like the writing style of it. As it got into it and I sort of felt more connected to the characters, I really, really liked them as well. It just took me a while to get there. I do have the sequel to this, although the sequel is more of a companion. But I am hoping that because I know this world a little bit more now, I will be able to get into that one quicker. I don't know when I'm going to read it, but I do want to read it soon because this is a pretty Illumicrate copy. I am thinking I'm going to keep this series because, like I said, I gave this one 4 stars. I enjoyed it enough. But I would like to read the second one, and if I'm still a little bit unsure, I may get rid of these, but if not, then I will. But I do need to read it soon because there is a 3rd one coming out in this series, and Illumicrate haven't announced their edition yet, but I'm pretty sure that they will be doing one. So yeah, glad that I read it. It's been on my backlist for a while, but it did take me like about 2 weeks to read this, which is not how long it normally takes me to read a book. So it definitely just took me a little bit of time to get into it. But once I did get into it, I had a good time. And then the last book that I've read, if you've been keeping track of my ratings, I said there were 3 4s and 3 5s. We've had the 3 4s. The 3rd 5-star book of the month was Prayer and Essay by Susanna Clarke. This was a Meg recommendation. It was on my TBR mash because Meg put it there. And I had a good time reading this. That is the phrase of this video, is had a good time. I really, really enjoyed this one. I was not sure what to expect going into it. I feel like it sort of, the front cover makes it look like it's like a Greek mythology retelling, and there's definitely like mythology vibes to it, but it's very, very different than what I expected it to be. And I don't really know how to explain it. Like I don't know how much is actually explained in the synopsis. Piranesi lives in the house, perhaps he always has. Yeah, basically it's about this person called Piranesi who lives in this place called the house, and it's a strange place where there's like these halls of statues and like it floods every so often, and it's just a very strange place. And there is, like, as far as he knows, there is one other living person there, and then there are dead bodies, and he does not know if there is an outside world, like what is happening. You don't really know where he is in time, where he is in time, whether it's like our world or if it's a fantasy world. It's very like, at the beginning in particular, it's very hard to like get a grasp of where you're at, but the way that it's written, like, it didn't matter. Like, I was fully along for the ride. Whereas with A Marvelous Light, like, I felt like I wasn't sure what was happening and I struggled to get a grasp of anything. This one, like, I knew what was happening. I didn't know why anything was happening, but it was really easy to follow along with and just sort of be swept away with it and just like along for the ride. And yeah, I had a really, really good time with this. It did not necessarily go where I expected it to go, but I don't know what I expected it to be. But very, very glad that I read it. It's also a very, very short read, and I did listen to the audiobook as well. I listened to the audiobook and read along because I felt like, and I feel like the audiobook did really help with the reading experience because it was a good audiobook. You know when you find one that you're like, oh, I just like how this sounds. That was very much like this. So glad that I read this one. And yes, Meg can feel like all smug that there are multiple books in this video that she has recommended that I gave 5 stars. But let's move on. Okay, so now we are on to August, and August was the second best reading month I've had this year, which is pretty impressive because I've been feeling like I'm in a reading slump. And August, I did not have a TBR because I didn't film a TBR video, and sometimes when I don't have a TBR, I struggle to know what to pick up. And I did do that, but I also but then what I decided to do was just lean into the rereads, which helped me to read a lot. It also meant that I was really enjoying what I was reading. So yeah, these ones, they should be fairly quick to talk through them because I've given thoughts on a lot of these on my channel before, but let's just give you the stats. So I read 10 books in the month of August, which, like I said, second only to March when I read 12. I read 3,970 pages, which was 128 pages per day. For the year to date, I did say I'd tell you this one, I'm at 96.86 pages per day, which is definitely pulled it up from the 92 pages I was at before. So I'm glad that I'm getting back on track. Hopefully, if I continue to do well with my reading for the rest of the year, I should manage to be over the 100 pages per day that I aim for. The average pages per book in August were 397, and I read 7 audiobooks and 3 that were a mixture of audio and physical, or audio and ebook actually for some of them. But yeah, I definitely leaned into listening to audiobooks as well, which did help with getting my reading up there, but you know, audiobooks are still reading, so it still counts. And then the last couple of stats, so for the age range we had 3 YA and 7 adult, and then for the star ratings we had 1 3-star, 3 4 stars and 6 5 stars. Like I said, there were a fair amount of rereads, so you can probably guess that the 5 stars are a lot of them going to be rereads, but I think I did have some new 5-star reads. Yes, I definitely did. I definitely had at least one. But sadly, let's start with my probably most disappointing book of the last 3 months, and that was Lifelight by Jay Kristoff. So you will see that I'm not holding this one up because this is one of the only Jay Kristoff series that I have not read or started reading. It's the first one in the Kristoff line that was not a reread for me, and I think there was a reason why I'd not read it before, because it was one that sort of intrigued me least. I'm not a massive sort of like, not sci-fi reader necessarily, because obviously like I read the Aurora cycle, I enjoyed that, but like the sort of sci-fi that I read is a very particular sort of sci-fi, and it does tend to be the sort of some like spaceships and other planets and things, whereas this is more sort of dystopian sci-fi, and I just didn't love it. I felt like the characters I didn't feel connected to, the storyline felt very predictable, and I just didn't care. And also like that, and what's annoying is that there's some things that like Jay Kristoff has used in other books that I've enjoyed and how it's been used in other books, but in this series in particular it's starting to grate on me, and I'm just like, maybe this wasn't the right way to tell this particular story. And I get that like there are techniques that people fall back on, but I just think for this, like, it didn't work well, and it sort of showcased a lot of flaws in the writing, whereas in other books I felt like it actually helped it a lot, if that makes any sense. But yeah, just did not have a great time. I gave it 3 stars. There are full thoughts on this in the live show. I should have said that for Aurora's End as well. I did say it for Aurora Burning. The live show for this one was definitely on my channel. The live show for Deviate, which is the second book in the series, should be happening before you have seen this video, because I'm filming this on the Monday and the live show is tomorrow, and this isn't going up till Wednesday. So if you want to see my thoughts on Deviate, which I'm not going to talk about in this video because I've read that this month, but if you want to see my thoughts on that one, watch the live show that we did yesterday on Lisa's channel. Spoiler alert, it's not got any better. If anything, it's got worse. But yeah, I read it. We're done with it. I've been I really can't wait until I'm done with the series. Anyway, let's move on to happier things. The next book that I read was another Bridgerton book, and it was An Offer from a Gentleman. So when I said that I was reading all of the Bridgerton books that have a series based on them, I'm not going to skip around in the order of the books. This one isn't actually going to have a series based on it yet, even though it is the 3rd book in the series, and we do have the 3rd season of Bridgerton starting, hopefully in December, I think it's supposed to be. This is because for some unknown reason they've decided, I know why, because like they've changed Penelope's storyline, so they need to do her book, but they've decided to skip past Benedict and Sophie's book and go straight to Colin and Penelope, and I'm not happy about it because I love Benedict and I did really enjoy this book. This one is like a Cinderella retelling. So Benedict meets this woman at a masquerade party and doesn't know who she is, and then a while after he sort of stumbles across someone who is like not necessarily in the best situation, sort of like in terms of like in society, and he ends up helping her out and then makes some like really poor decisions in like sort of the propositions that he makes to her based on like where she is in society at the time, and like it doesn't go well for a while. There's a bit of miscommunication in here, but the actual like romance between them, when it is going well, I really enjoyed it. I do like Benedict and Sophie as a couple, and yeah, I do like a Cinderella retelling, so I enjoyed this one, and I really hope they do this one as season 4 of Bridgerton, because I would like to have Benedict's series, please and thank you. Anyway, moving on to our first reread of the month, which was The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. So this is another one that I read like last year, and I feel like I have talked about it, but also maybe I haven't talked about it enough because I love this book so much. This one I reread for a few reasons. One, because I just wanted an easy audiobook to put on. Also because I'd recommended it to someone and I wanted to check what the triggers were, which is the same thing for another book later on. Just because I had like a general idea, but I just wanted to make sure, because I know the person that I recommended it to does have some triggers that I just needed to make sure like weren't in here. I was like 99% sure they weren't, but I'm like, you know what, any excuse for a reread. This is about two characters called Deb and Charlie, and they meet on a reality show. Deb is a producer, Charlie is the contestant, and it's like a Bachelor type TV show. And what is not supposed to happen is Charlie's not supposed to fall for his male producer, but he does. And I really, really love this book. I should actually say there was one DNF in July, I believe, that I have just not talked about. But this book has reminded me because it was also set around a reality show, but I kind of didn't want to talk about it because it was a friend who recommended it to me and I've just not told her that I've DNF'd it. So I'm really, really sorry, Tori, but I had some issues with Want to Watch and I was finding myself getting very angry with it and was not enjoying it, which is another part of the reason why I picked this one back up, because I'm like, oh, this is how I want it to be done. And I had a great time, and I cannot wait for Alison Cochrane's next book to come out. It's like a road trip one, I believe, and I'm so excited because I can't reread her other book at the minute because it's a Christmas one, so I need to wait till Christmas. So I'm like, give me more. I don't think it's coming out till next year, but I keep seeing stuff about it on Instagram and I'm very excited, and you know, maybe I'll just have to reread this one again before we get to that point. The next reread that that went well, I just dropped a load of books. Anyway, I will pick those up momentarily. The next reread that I have is one that I read for a live show. It was for Schwab-A-Long, not one of my read-alongs this time. It was for the Schwab-A-Long, which is hosted by Tori, Lisa and Jem. Sorry, Jem, I very much did not forget your name then, I promise. Anyway, Tori, Lisa and Jem host Schwab-A-Long, and they asked me to be on The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which I was very happy to do so because this is one of my favourite books. If you would like to know thoughts on this, I believe the live show was on Tori's channel, and it was a fun time where we ended it up talking about like imagining Luke as like a worker getting pulled in for not fulfilling his quota for the year, and it was a fun time. But anyway, it's basically about a girl called Addie who makes a deal with a devil type character. She asks for more time because she doesn't want to sort of live the typical life. She's from France like 300 years ago, and she doesn't want to live sort of the typical life of sort of getting married, having children, and not really being able to kind of explore the world because you couldn't in those days. And she asks for more time to be able to experience things in the world, and he says fine, but there is a like trick to it, and that is that basically everybody is destined to forget her. Whenever someone turns her back, whenever someone closes a door, they forget that she is who they were talking to. They forget that she exists. So she lives through life but can't really form any lasting connections with anyone, although she does find some sneaky little ways around it throughout this book. And then one day she ends up meeting someone who remembers her, and there's reasons why, and we get to know that character, and he breaks my heart, and I love him so much. That is my main thing for this book. It's like I really, really love the writing in this book, but Henry is my favorite, like is one of my favorite characters I've ever read about, and I love him so much. And if you'd just like to hear me like gush about Henry multiple times in a live show, feel free to go and watch the one that was on Tori's channel. I gave this one 5 stars. We've got more rereads now, and I've realised that in this wrap up I've talked about every book that I own by this author, and we have 2 coming up now, and the second one is One Last Stop by Katie McGuiston. I put a hold on this at the library and it came through. It was an audiobook. I was like, yeah, you know what, this is going to be a good one to listen to while I'm like commuting, which, you know, funnily enough, it's all about a commute. It's about a girl called August who moves to New York, and when she gets there she meets Jane on the train. That rhymed. And she sort of has this like instant connection with her, tries to flirt, ask her out, and it doesn't quite go according to plan. And then she finds out that part of the reason why maybe like nothing is happening with Jane is because Jane is stuck on the train, and by that I mean she is from the past and is like connected to the train and cannot physically leave the train. And yeah, it makes it a little bit hard to start a relationship when one of them is literally stuck on the subway the entire time. It also makes for some interesting PDA situations that go on because there is a romance, but one of them very much lives on the subway. Anyway, I really enjoy this book. I don't enjoy it quite as much as Red, White and Royal Blue. I find that some of the pacing in this is just like not quite what I want it to be. I find that like while I enjoy the romance in this, the whole sort of like mystery of why Jane is there and how it all ties together is not as perfect as I want it to be. But that being said, it's still 5 stars. It's just like the extra stuff in this, like extra to the romance, I don't enjoy quite as much as the extra stuff in Red, White and Royal Blue, if that makes any sense. But I do really, really like the group of people that August lives with in this, sort of the found family that goes on in her apartment that she lives in. Love them. Wish we got more of them. Like, can we just have a whole like book of their stories, because they all sound great. But anyway, 5 stars, very much enjoyed it. And on to the next Casey McQuiston book that I read. I reread Ike Shara Wheeler. This hold also came in at the library. This was also to read to double check any trigger warnings that are in this one. And I had a good time reading it. I remembered why I enjoyed it so much. This one, I feel like is the least talked about Casey McQuiston book, probably because it's YA, so like it's a different vibe than the other two are. But it is still a romance. It's still got some other topics going on in there. What I particularly enjoyed in this one is that it is about growing up in the Bible Belt of America, and it talks a lot about sort of religion and how that works when you are a queer teenager. And I had a great time with this one. It's about a girl called Chloe who gets kissed by another girl called Shara, and then Shara disappears, and Shara leaves notes for and then it turns out that she kissed 2 other people before she disappeared as well, and she's leaving notes for them, and they're trying to figure out where she is and what's happened. Chloe was Shara's rival for valedictorian, and then the other people that had notes left for them was Shara's boyfriend and the boy next door as well, who seems to have had a crush on Shara for a while. And there's so much more to it than that. And again, found family vibes in this is perfect. I love it. It does very much make me think of Paper Towns by John Green when I'm reading it, but that is not a bad thing because I do enjoy John Green's writing. But also I feel like I was sort of invested in the mystery a little bit more in this one, where it's like I did really enjoy Paper Towns by John Green, but I didn't really care that much about the person they were looking for. Whereas I feel like in this, it did a good job to actually make me really intrigued about Shara as a person. And yeah, I had a great time. I do recommend this one to people because, like I said, it's probably the Casey McQuiston book that I spoke about least, and I wish more people would read it. Okay, we are getting close to the end, although the pile of books that I have is making it look deceptively like I am at the end, but I still have like 4 more books to talk about. It's just that 2 of them I don't have to hold up. So the first one of those is The Fiancé Farce by Alexandria Bellflower. This one I gave 4 stars. I enjoyed it, but it's one that I referenced earlier on. I felt like the build-up into the romance wasn't quite like, it just didn't have the right balance that I wanted it to, which is an issue I've had with Alexandria Bellflower before. So this one is about 2 characters. I can remember the name of one of them and I can't remember the name of the other. It's Tansy and Gemma, I've just remembered. Tansy basically has lied to her family and said that she has this girlfriend because she was sort of sick of all the questions that people were asking about her love life and all that. So she lied and said that she had this girlfriend, and she took the lie one step too far with one person, where she had a picture of somebody who was on the cover of a romance novel, and I think they assumed that was her girlfriend and she didn't correct them. And then that all goes terribly wrong when she is at a wedding and it turns out that the person that she has said was her girlfriend is a guest there, is related to the groom, who is somebody that Tansy has not so great history with. And then basically it turns out that they both kind of need something from each other. So Gemma is in a situation where she needs to get married to fulfill something to do with a family will, and they decide to come to a mutual agreement to help each other and pretend that they are engaged and actually get married, because she needs to actually get married. And obviously, as you can guess, they end up actually falling for each other throughout it. What I felt with this is that, like, the build-up started off good. Like, it started off with some nice banter between them, but then it just there was a moment where it turned, and it just turned too quickly, which is, like I said, an issue I've had with Alexandria Bellflower once before. It feels like it sets it up well, but then there isn't sort of like a slower progression into like, oh, I can see them starting to like each other in that way. It just suddenly, I'm supposed to believe that they are obsessed with each other, and I'm like, when did this happen? Like, I just didn't see the steps here. And that's what it felt like with this. And it did and this is one that did actually take me a while to read as well. I got into it a little quicker once I got the audiobook. I don't know if that was just a me thing of not wanting to read physically, but I was reading the ebook and it just took me a little bit of time to get into it. But once I did get into it, I did enjoy it, and I did give it 4 stars. It's just a lower end 4-star. But we're going to go on to a couple of 5-star reads now, so it's fine. The next book that I have to talk about is Blue Lily, Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the 3rd book in the Raven cycle. I can't give you too much of a synopsis of this one because, again, spoilers for the first 3, but essentially it is about a girl called Blue who has always been told that when she kisses her true love, he is going to die. And then it's about these 4 boys from this local prep school and their search for a dead Welsh king. And that is a very weird synopsis of it, but it is the synopsis of the book. And I really enjoyed this one particularly. I liked the second book in the series. I've given both of the first 2 5 stars. I gave this one 5 stars. But my issue with the second book in the series is that I knew something about where this series was going before I started reading them. And because I knew that, I knew a lot of the stuff in the second book didn't really like matter because I knew that something else was going to happen. So it felt like the stakes were gone from it a little bit because I knew that that wasn't actually the direction that it was heading. I knew it was just like a brief little moment in time, but then it's going to change. This book, because we've sort of got past that point, the things that we're leaning towards now is more heading towards the end game that I know of. So I was more on board with this one and I very much enjoyed it. I do really, really like these characters, and I do like that they're all sort of, I say all because 4 of them like were all very much connected beforehand, but I think because we're getting to know them a bit more and because more is happening like as a group, that I've been sort of starting to connect a little bit more, and I'm just having a really good time, and I'm really looking forward to the 4th one. Although I can't remember if this is like one of those series that people have said the ending isn't as good as the rest of them, but so far I am enjoying it, so I'm gonna hope that I'm gonna enjoy the rest of them. I only have 1 more, although there is a sequel series that I will read as well. There are 3 of those, I believe, and I'm looking forward to reading those at some point. Next up, we have 2 more books to talk about. My throat is starting to hurt, so hopefully I can talk about these quickly. It is the 3rd and final Emily Henry book that I've read. I still have 1 more of her published adult romances to read. I still have Happy Place to read, but I will be reading that this month. But I recently, and by recently I mean like finished it at the weekend, read Book Lovers, and I had a great time. As I said, I keep enjoying these more and more with each Emily Henry book that I read. This one, no exception. I really, really enjoyed this one. This is about Nora, and she is basically the sort of girl that always gets left in a rom-com. So the sort of storyline where someone goes to a small town, they are in a relationship with someone in the city, they fall in love with someone in the small town, and they leave the sort of evil city woman behind. She is that person, but she's not evil. She just like likes her job and likes living in the city, which, you know, fair enough. I am very much a city person myself, which I think is one of the reasons why I loved this book. And basically what happens in this is that after having been left multiple times for people who go to move to a small town, her sister decides that they are going to go and take a trip to a small town. And while she's there, she finds out that actually one of her sort of like work rivals, who, I say rivals, like they're not on competing teams, they just had like a bad first meeting with each other and have like not really liked each other that much since. But it turns out he is also there, and she keeps bumping into him, and you can see where the romance is going to develop here. I had a great time with this one. Like I said, I feel like there were things to do with like Nora as a person that I was like, oh, I understand this, I love this. And it's probably my favourite. Charlie is probably my favourite of the love interests that I've read from Emily Henry, but I feel like I've said that with each of the books that I've read. So let's see how we get on with, I think the love interest is called Win in Happy Place. We'll see how I get on with that one. I will be reading it this month. But so far, all the Emily Henry books have been 5 stars, so doing well there. And then the last book that I read on the last day of August, I had finished Book Lovers that morning, and I was traveling. I had like a train journey that was an hour and a half each way, and I'm like, I'm gonna need an audiobook to listen to while I'm doing this. So I picked up the next Bridgerton book, which is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, and this is actually the one that season 3 of the show is going to be based on. So now I can do my rewatch of seasons 1 and 2, and I'm very excited about it. This is Colin and Penelope's story. I very much enjoyed this one. I think because I knew who both of the characters were, whereas with the other ones, I mean, I did know who they were because I'd watched the TV show for the first 2 seasons, but in terms of like the books, I'd been introduced to both of the characters prior to this book, whereas with the others, the love interest is very much someone like new to each book. I mean, obviously with the first one, everyone's new, but like Kate and Sophie only came into it in their respective books, whereas Penelope you've seen a little bit throughout, and it was fun seeing her story as well as seeing Colin's story. And yeah, it was just a cute time. I'm really intrigued to see how they do this with the show, because they're gonna have to make some changes, because they made some changes to like the timeline of things, but I feel like some of this could play out really, really well on screen, and I'm looking forward to it. And I don't think I have many more thoughts. Basically, the Bridgerton books have mostly all been 4 stars for me. I think the first one is my least favourite because there are some questionable things with that romance. I mean, there's some questionable things with all the romances, but the first one in particular. But I just enjoy them. Like, they're not the best written, but I just enjoy them. I read them quite quickly and they're good for what they are, which is why I've been giving them 4 stars. Anyway, I think that is everything. That is a big pile of books that I read. And like, I'm gonna hold, these are the ones that haven't fallen on the floor, so we'll hold these ones up for the thumbnail, but there is like twice as many of these on the floor, and then also the ones that I don't physically have. So it's a lot of books. I've done a lot of talking. Thank you if you have bared with me through this entire video. I am now gonna film another one of these that's about the theatre shows that I've seen, and hopefully not ramble for quite as long. But thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know what your favourite book is that you've read in the last few months, if you've read anything that I've read and you want to also gush about it, or if you have very different opinions from me, let me know. And then we'll see you guys soon with a new video. Bye.